Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon, and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Welcome to, I believe we're up to episode 18 now of the Wot Supp podcast. We're getting some really good guests now, and today's guest is one that I've been pretty excited about. I normally like talking to the bodybuilders and stuff like that. That was, obviously my passion coming up. But today we've got IFBB pro Aaron Pilates. He's taken some of his time to have a chat to us. I know the man's very busy. He's got a lot going on. I've been trying to get him on for over a week now, but he's finally here. So thanks for joining us, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, sorry, I was in Darwin last week and it was just, I tried to do it, but it was a madhouse because we're away, and I had my son and then my sisters, both her kids, and they're only 3 and 1, and they were just running around being crazy, and it was just couldn't do it. Even today, I had to go to my mum and dad's house because they're away, so just so I can have some peace and quiet.
That's it, man. Well, that's probably an interesting point. Is that you are a family man, and you've got all these things going on, all these different baskets, all these different eggs, going on. So for the people who don't know, like obviously everyone knows you're IFBB 212 pro, and I think a lot of people, unless they directly follow you, they don't know a lot else about you. So can you give us a bit of a background?
Yeah. So. I've been training, I'm 31, live on the Gold Coast, been training 15 years, so fairly young since I started. Started training for football reasons, this and that, and started competing I trained for like 7 or 8 years before I started competing. Competed at 23. IFBB was FitX was my first show, which is like the older Arnold Classic, And so started then, and I competed as an amateur till 2017. Won every show in Australia in that 4-year period, 4 times Mr. Australia, I think 7 times Mr. Queensland, Arnold Classics and things like that. And then I realized after like maybe the first 3 wins that I was like, I'm probably gifted for this sport, So then I started taking it real seriously after that. So I was a little bit party boy when I started, and I used to still go out and, hit the clubs and festivals and shit like that. But then when I realized that I could be pro, I sort of knuckled down. That's when I really started seeing my full potential. I started accelerating more after that. And then turned pro 2017. Had to have a year off. I was going to compete straight away, but I was buying a new house, and without going into details, it wasn't cancel approved or something. We paid for the house and we couldn't move in for like 10 months. So I had to move in my mum and dad. So that put a brakes on my competing. So 2017, I had that year off. And then, 2018, got back into it. First pro show was New Zealand. Won that one and qualified for the Olympia on the first go. So that was a good start, I guess, and then got second in the Indy Pro in America after that. And then 9th in the Olympia last year, 2019.
Yeah. So, being that, you're obviously Australia's most successful 212 ever, and I mean, I know that it's a reasonably new category in Australia, but I think, is it something that shocked you, or were you kind of expecting to do as well as you did? Coming out of that, getting the pro card, usually we see this kind of period where it takes a while before people kind of find their groove in the pro scene, but you just went out and started winning shows and started doing well and qualified for the Olympia. Did that come as a shock to you, or did you sort of back yourself and know that that's where you were headed?
Oh, no, even when you say it like that, sometimes makes you feel a bit, like I still can't believe it, Like when I turned pro, to be honest, I was sort of shitting myself and thinking, it's going to be a while before I'll do well. And, I was sort of a little bit negative. Like as an amateur, I was really confident. Like I almost felt at one point as an amateur, I felt like I would never lose, So, but then as a pro, I just felt, I don't know, you watch all these guys on YouTube and everything, and you put them on this pedestal and you think, they're just way above my level, but they weren't. And it wasn't until I contacted Patrick Tor, who was pretty unknown in Australia when I contacted him. And he looked at my photos and he messaged me and he said to me straight away, "You're a top 10 Mr. Olympia athlete." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think you can win pro show in the next 12 months." And I thought he was crazy. I thought he was honestly nuts. And then, what did he say to me? He's like, "No, I can almost guarantee it. In fact, what do you say?" He goes, "I'll do you a deal. If you, I'll only charge you if you win. And I'll take 20% of your winnings as the coaching." And I was like, "This is crazy. Like, I didn't think that would be the case, you know." And then, but he obviously he had an eye for it. And then, obviously during the prep, once their lineup was announced, people started predicting who was going to win, and people were picking me. And that was as cool as that is. That was the worst anxiety, pressure I'd ever experienced ever in my life. I couldn't even sleep. It was the worst prep I ever had.
Yeah, wow.
The pressure, because every other Australian usually, except for Josh pretty much, he done pretty well straight away. But everyone else, like, there's no pressure because usually they don't come anywhere and it takes a while for, you know, most of the time Australians don't really place, not first call out, you know what I mean? Usually it's down the bottom. And I think there's no pressure when it's like that. And when people were saying I was going to win, and then Justin Wessels joined the lineup, and, you know, that the pressure with Justin Wessels was hard because he'd never been beaten in 20 years he'd been beaten in the Australian in 20 years. I was like, oh, this is even more pressure because the Aussies are going to want to watch me versus him.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Do you think it's a funny point that you make there? Do you think that, like I know for me anyway, I feel like Australia is just this really strange country for this tall poppy syndrome thing. And I know that, like, we've all seen you for years, you know, like I came from competing in the IFBB and, you know, obviously competing in shows that you were winning. So, you know, I'd seen you for a long time. We'd all seen your body before. Then sometimes you kind of, you know, you can have your blinkers on a little bit and not realize what you're actually looking at, that there's something really impressive there. And, you know, I think that a lot of times Australians, they want to throw shit on people and sling mud. But then when we saw people, you know, the likes of like Flex Lewis and stuff saying, you know, Aaron Pilates, this guy from Australia is going to be the next big thing, it kind of shut a lot of people up. Do you kind of see that as well? That's kind of from where I'm sitting. I kind of saw a lot of people kind of, you know, either talking you down or whatever it might be. And then it was just like, everyone just went silent after they saw what you ended up doing as you hit the pro scene.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because that was the hardest thing I sort of had to deal with, to be honest. I was thinking about this the other day. I had a lot of friends that were like, not obviously not your best friends, but like I like to think pretty good friends in the sport. And a lot of them sort of, got tall poppy when I started, like before the first pro show. I heard some comments like, "Oh, he's going to get a reality check. He's in the big boys now. Like, you know, blah blah blah." Pretty much saying I was going to get my ass whooped. And then, but that little do they know, I need that shit to hear because it fuels me like a savage. Like I'd feed off that, you know. And I heard we're supposed to be my friends, you know what I mean? And then a lot of them were picking my own friends were picking Wessels to beat me, that's fine. Everyone's got their opinion. But me, it's like an absolute savage when I prepped. Like I was prepping so hard. I would have done, if Patrick said no carbs for a month, I would have done anything he said, you know? And then when I won, I knew people would still say something because there was only 5 guys in the lineup. So I thought a few people were like, just hang it up. You're going to the Olympia now. Don't do Indy Pro. And I'm like, nah, fuck this. It's an American show. I want to go to America and then I want to win that show. And then they can't say nothing, you know? And it exactly happened as I thought. I won the NZ and then a few people said, oh yeah, but some really well-known names, I won't name names, but one of the names was like really, really, really well-known. Said, oh yeah, it's only 5-man lineup. And there wasn't even anyone from USA in the lineup. Like, because I just won the first pro show. It's never been done ever by an Australian, you know, and then they throw mud on it. Only a few people, and then I announced that I'm still doing Indy Pro and I wanted to make a statement, you know what I mean? So, and then I went to Indy and I arguably would have won that show. I lost by a split decision. I got second by 1 point. I won prejudging. So, but Patrick said to me, he goes, they won't let you win because that year, I don't know if you remember, Flex, Hardy Chupin, and like Jose retired. They had all these people pull out. So there was a really, not many people qualified. And Patrick's like, if it's close, they won't give you the win because they need more people to qualify, you know. And I won prejudging. Like Muscular Development interviewed me after prejudging, and they're like, "You're winning the show." And that's when when they said that to me in the interim, that's when I was like, "Fuck!" Like I've just won NZ. I'm in America. Yeah. I'm winning the prejudging of a 15-man USA lineup. There's a Mr. Olympia athletes in there. That's when I was like, "All right. Now I'm definitely a force to be reckoned with." Do you know what I mean? So even though I got second, like I was pissed off, to be honest. Even though I looked happy, I was not happy. Because I could have gone into Olympia unbeaten, you know? Then they shut up after that. All of them completely shut up after that because what could they say? I went to an Indy Pros, pretty big show, and 15 dude lineup, you know, and heaps of people were saying that I won it, like Jose Raymond, and like I had Regan Grimes message me. I had like Sean Roden, all the Dennis James, all these big names were messaging me, you know, saying like, you won that show. So I didn't care as long as I made a statement, you know what I mean? Then they sort of stopped after that. And then the Olympia was sort of the nail in the coffin. Like no one was really talking any shit after that, but I knew if I got top 10 in the Olympia, that would be the end of it. And top 10 was the goal. Under 7th would have been really happy. I would have been overly ecstatic, and then I was sort of in between. I got 9th, so pretty much ticked all my boxes I wanted to do.
Sorry, and it sounds like you spent most of the last few years just constantly in prep, and something that's exciting though here is there's been a lot of shows with a lot of different, I guess, approach angles. You know, like especially when you've got weight limits imposed, like with 212 class and so on. Did you nutritionally is what I'm interested in though, because I think a lot of people would love to have the opportunity. A lot of our listeners would love to, you know, be able to pick your brain on some of the things you've sort of done throughout your career, how you've evolved in terms of nutrition, how things have changed from prep to prep, or at all, you know, if it does change much, you know, or if you just run a pretty similar sort of course. So I guess could you run us through what a day in the life nutritionally looks during, you know, some of these times we're leading up to these big shows, you know, like is it a lot of, you know, is it relatively consistent or is it, you know, you're trying something new each show, trying to really dial it in and play with the variables, mate? Could you run us through some of your, you know, some of the take homes on what you've been doing food wise?
Yeah, well, I've had in my career, I've had 3 or 4 coaches. So Logan was my first ever coach, and back then it was pretty basic sort of stuff. It was just generic whole food diets, relatively low carb, and he would just reduce the carb, I guess, coming into the show. Nothing was overly fancy. Then Logan back then, 2013, 14, would do like a 2.5 day carb up. It was funny back then. We used to carb up on my first ever win, which it worked well, but I wouldn't do it again. We used to carb up on what's it? The pavlova cake.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So like Logan
just pure sugar and egg white.
Yeah. So Logan's approach back then, Logan's approach has changed, but just to give everyone a bit of a history point of what I used to do. But I used to get shredded. It worked, but I felt like back then we would over diet. You know what I mean? So we would over diet a bit too much, and I would deplete a little bit too much, and then we do a couple of days carb load, and I swear we didn't even measure the carb number back then. Like it was just like 250 grams of rice, like 7 times a day sort of thing. And then the next day would be sweet potato, then for 2.5 days, and then that pavlova cake, you know. But and then I went to America. I got in. Back then, you used to be invited to go to the Arnold. It's all changed now. You know. Back then it was a prestige to get invited to the Arnold in America. So the year that I went, I was the only one invited. I went over to America, and I tried the pavlova in America, but they didn't know what a pavlova was. and it's so dumb. I look back at some of the shit I used to do. It's so dumb. Like now that I know about nutrition and everything, and I could have carved up on anything. Like I literally went down to Hilton to the chef, and I'm like, you need to make a pavlova. And he's like, I don't know what a pavlova is, in his American voice. So I went and Google printed out a recipe and gave it to him. and I took And he made it, and it was terrible. It was like this jelly, squishy cake that was like melting. And I put it in a container, took it to the Arnold Classic, and I carved up on it. And I swear he fucked it up because it just didn't have the same effect. I look back now, I'm like, I literally could have just had rice to soda and added some salt last minute, and or sugar, and it would have worked just the same. But I had no nutrition knowledge back then, you know. So I did America over there, and
that show you were a bit disappointed in, right? That first time you went over for Arnold's.
Yeah, I felt like, to be honest, I felt like I truly got ripped off that show really badly, because I was unbeaten I know I was an Australian amateur, but I was unbeaten when I never lost a show when I went to America. And I was in the under 80 class, and I weighed in at 80.001. I was like 1 gram over 80. And because I had jocks on, he goes, "Oh, you can go on down under 80." So I was the heaviest in the class, and I was proper shredded. And that was a cool prep. I don't know if you remember this, but I had Sean Roder and Dexter Jackson helping me that week. So that was my first taste of like getting popularity. Like I was hanging out with Sean Roder, and I went to his house. I went food shopping with Dexter Jackson, and it was the most coolest thing.
Yeah, I remember seeing on your Instagram you saying, I think you said you were training. I don't know if it was Golds or something like that, but Sean Roden had come up to you and said, "Man, you've done all the work. You know what's going on. You just go up there and get it done." And it was like this big confidence boost for you, right? To have him walk up to you in the gym and say that to you.
Yeah, well, not many people would know how we become friends, but he was guest posing at the show that I won, that I got invited to the Arnolds, was Australasia's. He was guest posing, and he called me across to his table, and he was single back then, and I was with this girl who was my friend of my missus' friend, and he asked me for her number, and I introduced them and everything, and then I spoke to him for like half an hour, blah blah blah. Then I seen him somewhere else, and then so I went on to America. He come up to me, he's like, "Aaron," and then he was like my best mate after that. And then he's like, "Anything you need, bro, let me know." And he helped me out several times in America. Like I went to his house and introduced me to Dexter. And yeah, it was like them become friends after that. And then over the years, we got really close, you know. So anytime he'd come to Australia and he needed help with anything, I would help him out. And to cut the long story short, I went to America. I got 7th in that show, and same sort of thing. Like I thought I was going to be top 2. I honestly thought I was first or second, and I got 7th. I didn't even make the first call out. And then I got feedback, and they said my tan was too dark, and they tanned me. It was their sponsors that you had to do. Like I thought you had to pay the one they recommended. I used the tan they told me to use, and because I had tattoos, they tanned me like 4 layers, and I was like Nigerian. Like, and then that was such a letdown, and I was so pissed off. Yeah, and then I left there, flew back to Melbourne a week later. I did the Arnold Melbourne, and I got sick in between, and then I didn't eat for 48 hours before weigh-ins. I had no food. I didn't eat nothing. Logan's like, "Just don't eat," because I had a real bad bloated belly. And then I made weight again, and I won that Arnold Classic. So that was
pretty good indicator.
Yeah, it was a good redemption, but that was
That's interesting with Sean. So Sean Roden actually, he copped a little bit as well for being, I guess, realistic online about actually allowing himself to be seen in moderate off-season shape, and I think that's one thing that people would love to know. A lot of pros have got different approaches with all the way back to the Lee Priest era with the heavy off-season bulk, and then prolonged cuts. You've got other guys who'll sort of sit, give or take 10 kilos from stage weight all year. What's your approach been throughout your career, mate? Do you fluctuate a great deal, or do you do a big heavy bulk and then prolonged cuts, or you just sort of stay at a pretty lean body fat most of the time? Like, what's your approach these days?
Well, to finish what I was saying about, I still laugh about my approach back then, what I was talking about. I've evolved so much over the years. Like after that Arnold Classic I was talking about, I moved on from Logan. Logan taught me a lot, and then I went to Charlie Duca. Charlie Duca's approach was similar to Logan's, but he had some old school cool approaches with training that I'd never really seen before. And then I started getting closer and closer with Adam Dowling, and then my nutrition knowledge started evolving around 2016, and then I started moving towards carb cycling. And then carb cycling to me is the king of all approaches, And then I started realizing that all these cheat meals, and I would have cheat days in prep where I'd eat fucking shit the whole day. I don't know if you remember them days, but I had a mate, Sonny, we'd have cheat days in prep on a Sunday where we would eat shit all day, and we thought that it was making us better. We thought, and it was a cop out. Like, I look back now, and prep was so easy then. Like, you only have to really diet for 6 days, then you're eating shit for a whole day, then you diet for another 6 days, But I realized it wasn't serving me any purpose, and it was destroying my guts. And I paid the price for it over the years, like making silly choices when I was bulking the bro way back then and finishing leg day and eating pizza and a fucking whole box of Fruit Loops. And I would stay up till midnight eating shit with no respect to my stomach at all. Nothing. I never thought about digestion. I just thought about calories. Calories, that was even it. I wasn't even about carbs. It was just about calories. And that was the worst decision. I went for a period where that was bad because I was putting on a lot of visceral fat. And I don't know if you remember, 2016 was the first year ever I felt like I took a backward step. My first year of my career. So that was the year that Ashkenani and everyone coming to the Arnold Classic, and it was next level lineup. Tony said it was the best under 90 lineup in Australian history. Do you remember that show?
Yeah, I do.
So
Yeah.
It was
I was down there.
Yeah, it was Samir Trudy, Ashkenani, me. It was like 3 or 4 of those guys are now pros, and like Ashkenani is like one that are good up there, obviously. That year, I was the highest placed Australian still. Like, I was the only Australian that made the finals, which was cool. But that was the softest that I ever looked. And my waist, I swear my waist got half an inch bigger that year. And to be honest, just to be completely transparent with everyone, why I believe that was the year I started playing around with insulin, and then I started eating stupid foods. So I just got wrong people influencing me. This is why I told young guys, it's just not the answer. I was punching huge calories and everything and anything, not paying any respect to visceral fat or storing fat. And I just had thicker skin and my waist was thicker. And everyone was like, same shit again, Australian tall poppy. Oh, that's it. Aaron's going to go backwards now. His waist is too wide. I had comments like, he looks like a fridge, blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, I went backwards. So then the next year, the transformation to the next year was like phenomenal. I went with Charlie and I just ate whole food, and we didn't have very many cheat meals, to be honest. And when I won my pro card, my waist was like an inch smaller when I won my pro card, and I was drying it hard. Probably still to this day, one of the leanest that I ever was. And all those things I mentioned was my undoing, but I fixed it in 12 months.
It's funny the amount of pros that I've talked to who talk about insulin as kind of some of their worst looks that they've ever brought to stage. Do you feel that insulin has been a destructive force in the look of bodybuilders over the last, say, 15 or even 20 years? Like, I know, like I did a camp with Milos Sarchev, and he's big on insulin. He's he's the insulin poster boy. But do you feel like it's had a detriment to the look of bodybuilders over the years?
I'll tell you why it does, because anything can be beneficial at the right dosage or the right application. But bodybuilders' mentalities, 99% of bodybuilders have an abuse mentality. So you get a bit of insulin and it makes you feel fuller. And when you go to the gym, you get a pump. But that sort of slowly disappears over time. And everyone thinks every single thing with bodybuilding, what frustrates me is when they start something, they just feel like they have to keep upping it. And then that's why you see these young guys that have come to me lately, and then you see young guys really young, like in their teenagers or 20, and they're doing massive amounts of insulin because they've started with 4 IU, then the 8 IU, then next thing they're doing 10, 15 IU several times a day, and then in off season they get lazy with the diet and they're eating shit that's off the plan, and that's when they start get sore and visceral fat, and it's an uglier look. And I feel like if I had to choose yay or nay, I would tell most people not to touch it because they just have a tendency to ruin their physique. If someone's really switched on and they're diligent with the diet and they're in prep mode all the time, then a bit of post-training insulin or pre-training a little bit can 100% be beneficial for the nutrient partitioning part of it. And it also can work synergistically well with growth hormone as well. that's another subject. But
Yeah.
it's almost like only if you can trust the athlete to harness that sort of mindset that it's just an accessory to help you shuttle food in and not to abuse it. You know what I mean? So I made a pact to myself. I didn't use it for 2 years after that year. 2 years, I never touched it. I won pro shows without it. The NZ Pro, won my pro card, didn't touch insulin. Driest look I ever had. The only reason I started, Patrick brought it back in eventually, a baby amount, 5 IU post-training, and never above 5 IU ever again. The only time he brought it back in briefly, but once again, just to shuttle the nutrients in post-training with a bunch of like rice cakes, jam, EAAs or WPI post-training, and that's it. Never to the point of where we wanted to abuse it like every meal or morning and night and things like that. And I don't know if other people know, but if you run like a long-acting insulin or active rapid with growth hormone, it can prevent you becoming diabetic in the long run. So there's benefits in that respect as well. But I just feel like people abuse it too much and it wrecks their physiques.
I think that, like, on the topic of PEDs there, it's something that a lot of people, it's a taboo topic. It's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But, I mean, we're kind of open to talking about all kinds of supplementation on this podcast. In fact, we've got Bill Llewellyn, who writes the Anabolics 1st through 11th edition, coming onto the show in a few episodes' time. But I just wanted to touch on something there, and I think it's a really important point you made, is that for some reason in bodybuilding, this mentality of more is better is prevalent, regardless of whether we're talking about insulin or regardless of whether we're talking about androgens. It's more is better. But I mean, I remember this would have been about 2012. We had Ronnie Coleman come over. The company I was working for at the time was King Sports and NDA. And we had Ronnie Coleman come over here, and I had a chance to talk to Ronnie about the kind of stacks of anabolics that he was doing when he was at his biggest. And the guy, he wasn't far beyond sort of 1.5 grams of total compound at any given time. And, I knew 19-year-old kids who were taking, twice that in the gym, who looked like absolute crap. I think a lot of people think that the difference between themselves and the pros is the amount of anabolics that they use. Is that sort of a common opinion that you see out there?
Mate, I had a 19-year-old kid come to me 3 weeks ago that was using double that amount, and his mate was using the same amount. I've done Instagram stories about this as well. It's just I can't fathom that we're getting to this. It's sort of shocking that guys are starting at this level. So this kid's 19. And he started a course at 18. And when I spoke to him, he had not ever been off. So 12 months straight. And I was like, man, when I started, it was like the first one I ever did was 6 weeks, which is not long enough, but that's just the truth of what it was. And then even my first prep, I was natty the whole off season. And then I just got on for the prep. You know what I mean? And I still won. That was FitX. I still won that show. And then it's just, they don't believe you. The simple fact is they just don't believe you. So
do you think that where do you think the idea comes from that the difference between, say, myself and, yourself is the amount of anabolics that is used? Where does that opinion come from, do you think?
It's as simple as this. Anyone with a brain knows it's a sport of genetics. That's just the be-all and end-all. And these guys want to be champions more than anything, more than they want to breathe. Like, I see these young guys, and I can just see passion in their voice. They do anything miserable, and straight up that they're not going to be that, because you can tell with someone's genetics if they're good or not, And they have no choice in their head. They're like, well, fuck. They watch some YouTube videos, bodybuilding motivation videos that fucking rev them all up, and they're like, I have no choice. I'm going to just take more drugs, because they're probably already busting their ass in the gym, training as hard as they can. Little do they know, most of the time their nutrition could be a lot better. And they think they have no choice. So they just start abusing. And then the problem is, that's why if juniors do it, how many over the years, juniors you see jump out of the gates really hard, and you see this junior, you're like, fuck, this kid's a monster. And he's like not 20. And then they disappear. Happens all the time. I can name names. I don't want to name people, but I can name 3, but I'm not going to name them. But come out and I'm like, and everyone's like, this guy's massive. but he's already balding at 21. And then I find out, friend of a friend, I find out what he's doing, and I'm like, no, he won't make it. And then the next minute, 23 years old, they're gone. Or they just never get any better. Or they get really sick. I know a couple of guys that got really sick, and then obviously they push it too hard and disappear because they just went, they're trying to bloody skip a few levels by cheating. You know, you got to just pay your dues. You got to slowly.
Well, I think that's that's probably a good transition into the topic of nutrition, because, like, you know, I've always been of the opinion that your most powerful tool, aside from your genetics, your most powerful tool that you have in bodybuilding is your nutrition, and your ability to eat, really. Like, at the end of the day, you know, you can't make something from nothing, right? The second law of thermodynamics says you cannot make something from nothing. We look at all this muscle mass that we see on you guys, it's made from something, right? And that something is the food that you put in your mouth. So for you as a pro bodybuilder, what does your diet look like? Like, let's say off-season diet. What does your diet look like for Aaron Pilates?
Well, that was one breakthrough that, and people sort of said to me, like, I think one of the years where I leaps and bounds got better was I'm a guilty. All the things that I say that I don't like seeing, I've been a guilty culprit myself when I was young. You know, as I said, silly diets, and you know, I've done everything stupid before and realized it was stupid, and then learnt from that. But I never paid respect enough. My whole amateur career, to be honest, I'm surprised I got away with it. I never followed a diet in the off season. So my whole amateur career, I literally just ate whatever I wanted. And looking back, I could have been so much better than what I was. You know what I mean? Like, my guys that I coach now, I wish I had me now when I was then. You know, not to knock on my coaches, but even my coaches back then, well, as soon as the show was over, we just did whatever. We just fucking ate, I don't know, 4 or 5 meals a day. I would eat Hungry Jacks, like whatever meals, and just go to the gym, and I winged it. And I really leveled up. When I understand what nutrition was, and when I started tracking numbers. Like, I didn't realize how little food I needed, but as long as it was whole food and I was eating 6 meals a day, if I was consistently eating, let's just say 400 grams of carbs, which is not heaps of carbs, but if I did that every day in the off season, I grew like a weed. Compared to when I winged it, I thought I was eating heaps of food, but I wasn't, because some days you don't realize. If you go out, have some sushi, this and that, and I used to think I was eating heaps of food, but when I actually started punching in the numbers and learning like macros and punching the numbers, I was like, some days I'm actually not eating much food, you know? And then when I started tracking it and like just consistently, let's say eating even 400 grams of carbs a day, but 6 meals spread apart, all different protein sources, really putting some effort into it. Post-training nutrition, properly having some fast sugars with some carbs like rice cakes and jam. And when I started really putting effort into it, I grow off minimal carbs. I could grow off, like, you would be surprised. I have days where I have 300 grams and I still consistently get better. And that was when I had a breakthrough, and I was like, fuck. You know, I realized that when I was growing way more in preps, like when I was prepping with Patrick, people were like, you grow more in your prep than you do in your off season. And I used to joke about it. And then I was like, realized that's because I fucking was under eating in my off season, you know, because food is the hardest thing to get down. So in my Olympia prep, we were carb cycling, and it was, honestly, look back, and I was eating more of my Olympia prep than my off season. So it was 620 grams of carbs high on my high day, 3 days a week. And then the rest of them were low days. And on the low days, it was, usually we're about 180, you know? So fats is minimal. Fats is like 50, 60 grams of fat, about 300 grams of protein. So, but yeah, so low fat, moderate protein, and those carb amounts. Then my Olympia prep, I was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and everyone was like, "Fuck, what are you doing?" And it was Patrick does not abuse anabolics. I can promise you that. It's very low. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. That's something that I found with a lot of the good coaches, is that the PED side of things is minimal. Like I've prepped with I've had Adam Dowling as a coach before, and he was probably the first guy that got me in legitimate shape. You know, like I'd competed in a lot of shows and, you know, and done reasonably well and all that sort of thing. But when I went with Adam, it was actually the least amount of PEDs I'd ever used for any show. We used only 3 compounds the entire prep and minimal dosages of them. And he got me in the best shape I've ever been in. And the main thing that we did was nutrition. And we looked at output, basically, was really how he did it. I barely did any, I didn't do any high intensity interval training like I'd done with other coaches. I didn't have to bust ass on the treadmill for, 2 hours a day. But, the PEDs were minimal and got in the best shape of my life. And I think that focus on carbs that you have there is really interesting with the carb cycling and stuff. I don't know what your take on it is, but I find that a lot of people, undervalue the importance of carbs when talking about muscle growth and put all the emphasis on protein. But, carbs and shuttling that glycogen into the muscles is a huge, huge part of the equation, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like protein, like it's so, it's almost like one of the least important. I know everyone talks about protein, but put it this way, I've tried the same diet on like 280 protein versus 340 protein, and I don't notice no different. But if I go from 600 carb to 400 carb, I do notice a lot different. It's the same, you know what I mean? I notice way more. I need to pay way more respect to the carbs. And my potential only lies now 100% is how much carbohydrates I can get down. So with that Olympia prep, I was the best that I ever grew period of any time of my life, including off season. Never grew that efficiently. And it was because like every second day having 620 grams of carbs, it was mostly just, Patrick's is like it's eggs and oats in the morning, and then low day was eggs and toast, and then it's just pretty basic like chicken, steak, salmon, basmati rice, white potato, real whole food basic stuff. And he likes to do the jam and rice cakes post training. He does make you throw. The diets are pretty intricate. He'll make you throw like safflower oil on the diet, and you'll have a lot of health supplement and vitamins spread throughout the day. It's a lot of vitamins and health supplements to take, like 20 different, liver tablets and.
Well, let's delve into that a little bit because we are the Wot Supp podcast. We love our supplements here. Obviously, you're sponsored by Massive Joe's these days, so I guess let's delve into the supplement side of things because it's something that's interesting that it's where our passion lies and it's what we're interested in. And, I know that obviously your diet and your training is going to really make up 95% of the work, but supplementation is a part of this, right? So let's talk through the supplements that you're taking and the importance that you place on supplementation.
Yeah. So my number one goal now, as I've evolved as an athlete, is, about feeling healthy and aiding digestion, because digestion's like as I said, my soul growth relies purely on my food that I can get in. Like I'm telling you, I've tried everything else, taken extra this, extra that. It's 100%. Like, as I said, that Olympia prep, when I'm smashing consistent carb numbers and my food's going down and I'm digesting it efficiently, and my stomach and digestive tract's working efficiently, that's when I grow like a weed. As soon as I fuck that up, I'm in the worst place and I just don't go anywhere. So my supplements mostly revolve around that now. So I take a lot of like Pharma Green blends and now I've switched my WPI to a vegan WPI because I find I digest it better. In regards of so my main one is every single day. I have cyclodextrin, as I feel like that's the best absorbing carbohydrate. I get the least bloating with it. I have that intra and sometimes pre-intra and post. Vegan WPI. At the moment, I'm using Switch. That tastes good. Like some of the vegan shakes, I can smash and I just digest it like nothing. Where the other ones tend to sit in my stomach a lot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying a few at the moment. Is the Nootropics. Like I'm using one Utopia, another one called Master Brain, and they make me work like my workflow is like 3 times more efficient.
I'm gonna send you a product that I developed called Neurocram. I think you'll really like it. It's a zero caffeine nootropic that I developed. It's commercially available on the market, but I'll send you down a tub of that to try. Obviously, don't spruik it too much because old Joseph might get cranky at me. But
man, people think they sound like a cop out, but they are fucking no joke, man. Those nootropics are honestly, they blew my mind more than any other supplement I've ever taken. I rang Joe. I'm like, dude, I said this is like the Limitless tablet. I was taking this Master Brain one, and I was, for some reason, like if I had it and then had coffee with it as well, it's like it like accelerated it, maybe. And this one didn't have caffeine in it. I swear I had no caffeine in it, so couldn't be in that. Like synergistically with coffee, I was at work because I want to be productive during my day, and I don't want to be lethargic. And I was like 100 miles an hour on my laptop, and I had like clarity of thought, like I was just on the ball, you know. So I like the nootropics a lot.
Well, nootropics is a space that me and Will are really passionate about at the moment too, because we're the same. You know, being business people, and you're a businessman as well. You need to be productive in those hours when you're behind the desk. You got to get as much as you can done. You know, and you're like myself and Will. You're a family man too, so you got to have time to be a dad. You got to have time in the gym. You got to have time to eat your food, but you've also got to have time to be a productive businessman. And for me, nootropics are really the answer to that. They're, you know, it's until someone tries them, they're going to think it's, you know, they're going to think it comes in that kind of healing crystal domain, you know, a bit of a crock of shit. But once you use them, you kind of see, wow, this is what enhanced cognition feels like. It's pretty incredible.
Honestly, the best way to describe it is it reminds you of that movie Limitless. Like if you could, I just want to be productive 24 hours a day because, you know, sometimes, especially in off season is the worst. If I'm doing a lot of food, I'm like at the laptop, is falling asleep at the laptop, and like because I work for myself, I can have a nap or do whatever I want. And it's hard to keep yourself accountable because you have days where you're sort of like just procrastinating, and you're like have these shitty days where you're not as productive. And then I hate that because I have to be productive, you know, because I've got, like you say, I've got a few businesses to run. I've got to train. I've got to check people in. I've got my son. I've got to be present when my son wants to play. I can't be falling asleep when he wants to play. So anything that can make me on the ball is better. And I found massive difference with these nootropics.
Yeah, interesting. It was there in terms of and does that change a great deal? Because I know that digestion is a massive thing for a lot of particularly pros who are pushing upwards, you know, 5, 6, 7,000 cal days and so on. And it sounds like if you're on your high days, if you're up around the 600 plus grams of carbs, and especially when it's all clean, that's just a lot of volume of food. And so, you know, sweet potato, you're looking at like 20 grams of carbs per 100 grams. So if you're putting down 600 grams from white potato, sweet potato, rice, you're looking at literally buckets of food. So is that sort of, you know, emphasis on
he actually has a bucket. He's got a bucket that says Aaron on it, and that's what he eats out of.
Yeah, I do have a bucket. I have a red bucket that I can have. But if I go 100% all whole food, like it's hard. Yeah. So, but in the Olympia prep, that's why I'm saying I was all 100% the whole food. The only thing that was like the jam and rice cakes was like a dessert to me. But I can't eat like that all year. I can't, like you say, like I in the off season, I have an approach where it's like 30% whole food, and then I'll have 70% whole food and 30% I'll, if it fits your macros, or I'll throw other cereals and shit in there just to make it up. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but when I'm prepping, that's another whole argument we could get into. But when I'm prepping, I fall back to there's no doubt if I can somehow get all whole food in, I perform better than when if I make the carbs up through other sources, you know, and then. Same thing if you give the reins to a client, they just fucking make everything a dessert.
Is there much? And when you're speaking of supplementation and so on, and in your off season, you're saying it's 70% whole food. So are you relying on your off season on more, you know, shakes, or you do mass gainers or whatever, or are we still just saying where you might rely on more powdered carbs than you know, rices and potatoes and stuff? Is that more the difference that you're seeing, sort of, you know, off season versus prep, mate, or with subs, or?
Yeah, lately I've had a few digestive issues. So I got to my biggest during COVID break when I was training with Sergio. I hit 109 kilos. It was the biggest I ever was. And I knew I started getting red flags because I started breaking my own rules. So I wanted 110. Like, I know I just, it sounds silly, but like, I was just like to Adam, I was pushing that hard for 110 and I could not eat any more food. And then I started breaking the rules. Like, I'd have 108, then I'd go and have Maccas or things. And I tell myself that I would never, because when I was with Patrick, I did not eat fast food for 12 months. Not one single time, nothing. And I was better. My digestion was perfect. But then, that last COVID break, I was trying to hit 110 and I wasn't under Patrick. He would have cracked the shits if he knew. I started eating like every second day. I would like have a burger and fries at Macca's, and I was just trying to push to that number. And then I started upping the carb powder, and I can only have a little amount of carb, even cyclodextrin. I can't have too much of it because if you ever see the way it digests in a protein cup, it's really thick and it sits on my stomach a lot.
Gluey, very gluey.
Yeah, I started breaking the rules of my own rules, and then I ran into some serious trouble. After Sergio left, I sort of detoxed, and I was losing my appetite. I was like, fuck, I'm losing my appetite here. And I don't run no orals or nothing like that because that fucks my appetite up as well. And then it was one thing after another. Then, I was going out for lunches, going out for breakfast a lot with my mate, almost every second morning. And then all of a sudden, bang, I had the same stomach issues I had, what I had in 2016, where I had no appetite. I was really bloated, and I've been trying to fix that the last 2 months. So it takes like a couple of months to fix this shit. So now I'm resorting back to, if I can't get my carbs in, I'm resorting to carb powder, or fruit, because I can always seem to get fruit in. But that's what I'm saying. If I could just get back to what I was doing in my Olympia prep, which is a prep, it's not even an off season. If I could get back to that, I would grow rapidly more again. So yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? The digestion part is such a limitation when you're pushing those sort of numbers in food. And I think you're right. Like, we went from where you had cheat meals before. I think that gets so glorified in bodybuilding culture. And I see it so often as a, with a few clients that I'm sort of doing diets with and so on, you'll see they're like, oh, so when, what are you doing for cheat day? What are you doing for that? And I'm like, well, there's no purpose to it. Even when you look at the data on it, like you look at Lyle McDonald's, he does some amazing work on, sort of refeeds and that sort of stuff. And there's some metabolic advantages when you're doing 2-3+ days sort of thing, at even if it's only just slightly above maintenance. But these 1 day cheat meals were just, like you said, digestively horrible foods to try and get through. I really can't see a benefit to it in prep at all. Like, I really don't see it as an advantage. You just, 1 day your energy balance is going to go up a few thousand calories. You're going to ruin digestion, and they're not particularly advantageous foods. I don't know why people do it, but it's so...
Yeah, so Patrick, I used to have this argument with Patrick. Patrick fully evolved me as a human being within this subject, because once again, I would have cheat meals and this and that. Patrick's fucking passionate on this subject, man. Like, he blows up. I don't know if you know his approach, but he will not do cheat meals ever, even in the off season. Doesn't fucking want it.
Yeah.
He's a savage. So if you want to, if you want to prep under Patrick, you've got to be a mentally tough human being. I tell you what, my Olympia prep, I did not have a single cheat meal for 20 weeks straight. Nothing. Like, how many people that prep as a coach? Both of you, how many people come to you? Imagine if you said, all right, here we go, we're starting preps in 20 weeks. You're not getting one cheat meal the whole prep. They would never last.
No way. I remember that was a real shock for me when I prepped with Adam. Was I remember that asking him, all right, so when do we get our first cheat meal? And he's like, what's that?
Yeah.
Well, like where we get to enjoy some foods. And he's like, you can enjoy some foods after the show's done.
Yeah. So Patrick's like that. So Patrick, here's my argument. I could talk about this forever, but this is my argument. So he's right. He's definitely right that it depends what you eat. If you go have if you have a cheat meal of sushi, I feel like sushi can be beneficial. Patrick, like once or twice since I've ever known him, has said to me, okay, you can have sushi. When I landed in Vegas, how funny is this? 5 days, not to change subject, but 5 days out from the Olympia, 6 days out from the Olympia, I landed in Vegas and I was ready. I was peeled when I made a pact to myself that when I left for Australia, there was no work to be done, And I landed and I first met him in person ever. I never met him in real life. And he seen me and I was ready. He's like, fuck, you're ready to go, Like, he actually said to me, pretty good compliment. He said, I'm one of two of the freakiest people in person he's ever seen. And like Brandau, Eduardo Correa, Nicholas Vuloid. When I posed in Vegas the first day, and he said that I was the freakiest top two, me and Eduardo, were the freakiest physiques he'd ever seen shredded wise. So he said to me, go have sushi. I had tears in my eyes. Like I was like, I said to my missus, I rang her, I said, fucking find the most expensive, best sushi restaurant in Vegas you can get. And we went to Yellowtail. Holy fuck, it was so expensive. Me and my missus went there and Levi, and we had like 4 meals. It was $260.
Wow. Holy shit, that's some expensive sushi.
I had no cheat meals for 20 weeks. Can you imagine how much I was so emotional about it? Like I was starving, you know? And we sat on the Bellagio, sickest spot, and the Bellagio next to the water fountain. So I was shooting the rockets up, and we had this epic table there, and we ate there. And then it was this $260, and the servings were like nothing, like this big. and I rang Patrick, and I'm like, dude, I just spent $260 at Yellowtail. It was next level. Mrs. said it was the best meal she ever had, but I'm like, I don't think I ate enough. and he goes, go here. And I went to this, I dropped her home first, took her home. Then I went to this other sushi place that's next to the Olympia. $24 you pay, and it's unlimited all you can eat. Can you believe that?
You just sat there on the end of the sushi train with your mouth there.
Bro, imagine Australian bodybuilders. I can't believe America's so much better than this country. $24 as much as you. I thought he was taking the piss. I said, what do you mean? The guy goes, it's all you can eat. I said, all I can eat. I said, you've got like octopus and you've got wagyu.
You've got Aaron Pilates sitting there with traps up to here going, what, all I can eat or all the average man can eat?
Yeah, and he's like, I said, what, can I get the octopus and the wagyu meat and everything unlimited? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I ordered like 10 plates and I'd already been for dinner. And then, then the next 2 days was like, I looked the best. I felt like that was the best look I ever looked. By the Olympia day, the morning of, I looked awesome, but I flattened out by the time I got to the stage. So that's another story. But can't remember what that subject we were talking about.
Just essentially the cheat meals. Yeah.
So Patrick's definitely right. So our structure at Olympia, he would just say, if I was flat, he would say 3 high days in a row. So I'd go 620 carbs, 3 days in a row. After I won the NZ Pro, we did 9 high carb days in a row.
Wow.
Like I was just dropping weight. Like I won in New Zealand. I was only 90 kilos. And then I hit 89 and I had never been below 90. Like I could never get below 90. And after the NZ, I went to Arnold's Classic Melbourne to work on the Massive Joe stand. And because I was just so busy at Massive Joe's, I was getting my meals in. My face was like a skeleton. And I rang Pat. I'm like, dude, I've done 25,000 steps today. And, I used to track steps and I sort of just made him do it. And he's like, fuck. And I said, I'm 89 kilos now. I've dropped fucking 2 kilos since I competed. And he's like, all right, go have a meal. So I got when I was at Arnold Classic, I went for dinner with Jane and Logan and we went out for a steak. But that's about as exciting as it gets with Patrick, you know. Steak and then sushi. At the Olympia was the only other time I had a cheat meal with him.
And now you, by the sounds of it, you're following a similar sort of scenario with most of your diet, and then you've just got a little bit of flexible dieting with sort of if it fits your macros around the side, yeah?
So to close my final argument, which I've said to Patrick, I said there's another aspect that he's not including in this cheat meal little argument, okay? Yes, he's right, but I will say this. When you have a family, this is why I assess everyone's situation separately. Number one, you need to assess their genetics. Can they handle it? Number two, what's their reasoning for the cheat meal? Like, are they just being a pussy? Because I'm definitely not being a pussy. Because I've proved that I can do 20 weeks, you know? And number three is like, it's not just about the food. So I found that last prep that I just pulled out of New York prep, I looked the best I ever looked. And I didn't want to say to people, but I was having weekly cheat meals. So going back to cheat meals again, and Patrick said to me, he didn't like it, but he's like, I said, this is my argument, because me and my missus were arguing a lot in Olympia prep, all right? I was like a monk, savage mentality that Olympia prep. And I sort of, I failed. I started failing as a family man for Olympia prep. I pushed so fucking hard. I had collapsed that prep like 5 times of exhaustion, like on the ground. I couldn't feel my legs and I'd go home and sleep and I didn't want to talk to anyone. And let's be honest, I wasn't fucking being present. Do you know what I mean? And then it gets to the point where if you've got a family that they fucking suffer pretty badly, you know. And I've got the sort of genetics that I can get away with going for breakfast or lunch and have sushi with my family. You know what I'm saying? Or go out for breakfast and have just eggs on toast. So that prep I pulled out of, we were having weekly cheat meals, and we made it a fun day, family day, where we would go out and have, Jay would pick the restaurant, I'd pick the restaurant, go out and have an awesome meal, then take Levi to playground, and then we were so much happier. You know what I mean?
So almost using the cheat meal to reduce cortisol and improve your life. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a cortisol. I promise you this, we were getting along better than ever. Jade and I were awesome, having family days. I was present. I was happy because I was having fucking, I don't know, steak and chips or just going out for a big breakfast once a week. Yeah. And I would just adjust the rest of the week and diet accordingly. And I got better and better and better every week. And I was shredded and I was not stressed at all that prep. We were all getting along. I was full as a house and I had striated glutes from the side completely at 9 weeks out, you know? So I reckon it was going to be my best look. And I'm sure at one point we would have cut them out. I reckon 5-6 weeks out, 5 weeks. At that point, Jade knows I call it stepping into the darkness. She would have said, do your business. But then we've had an epic prep till 6 weeks out. Hasn't felt like a prep to her at all. And then I only have to really push for the last 6 weeks. I found that was the best approach because prep didn't feel like prep. Even Jade said, this does not feel like a prep. We were going shopping all the time, mid-weeks. And I would train when Levi was at school or late at night. And it wasn't like I was in a prep. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I think there's definitely something to be said for that. You know, if it's the difference between staying sane or going insane or destroying your relationships, you know, the amount of bodybuilders that you see destroy relationships during a prep, throw important people in their lives away during a prep because, you know, they were that focused on this competition. And, you know, we see marriage breakdowns and we see all sorts of different things, not to mention what's going on, you know, on a chemical level with your, you know, elevated cortisol. That cortisol's up. Forget about getting lean, you know, forget about building any new muscle. So, you know, I guess I'm sort of, I'm in two states of mind with it. You know, I feel like, for me personally, you know, I'm not an elite bodybuilder. I'm not a pro like you are, but I personally got my best look with Adam when we weren't doing cheat meals. In saying that, was it probably one of the most damaging preps to my relationships? Yes.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that Adam doesn't give compliments very easily. I remember the first compliment I ever got off Adam was at the Arnold's when he looked at me and he goes, "Oh man, you're looking good." And I nearly like cried. It's like, you know, when your father finally approved. But the rest of the prep is like, "Nah, dude, you're fat. What's going on? You're not eating. Like, you're like, I've got bikini girls who eat more than you. You're pussy," and this sort of thing. Yeah. So it was a pretty brutal prep. But you know, there's definitely something to be said for that cortisol reduction aspect to those cheat meals.
Massively. And Dr. Andy Galpin did a really good thing. He's probably one of the most versed people in sort of dealing with athletes, particularly, you know, from every sport, MMA, Olympians. And he had an Olympian who went back when the Olympics were in Rio. And she was, because they had really, really pathetic sort of food available. Nutrition was really like, there was nothing available for the athletes in the camp there. And she was stressing hard leading up to an Olympics, obviously, training for years up to it, was getting there. And her body was just shutting down. She was freaking out. She was, you know, at the peak of her performance, but was, you know, really, really not performing well. And so what it is, they started throwing in, like, they use vegetable juices in this particular one, but huge amounts of nutrients, huge amounts of carbs. Like, she was having like 300 or 400 grams of carbs for a, you know, 60-kilo female athlete in pure fructose, and was just dropping weight constantly. And it was just purely dropping that cortisol, getting her back in a good state. So, but I think, mate, we've covered some amazing content today. We've done nutrition, we've done SUPs, we've done extracurricular SUPs as well, family. Really appreciate you giving us your time there. I know you're a busy man. Thank you. So,
just one thing, Aaron, before you run, this is something that we like to do with our, with most of our guests, is we get you to give your, let's say your top 4 SUPs at the moment, your top 4 favorite SUPs that are out there on the market. Doesn't matter if they're Australian brands, doesn't matter. Obviously, whatever is your top 4 favorite supplements out there. You can name brands, you can name whatever you want. Let's have them.
I've got a list here. I got of my current stack on here. Massive Joe's. Where is it? My favorite would be where is it? Let's see. It'd be Switch Vegan WPI that I'm using at the moment. That one, post training, digests well. Some vegan ones taste like shit. Takes a while to find a good one, but that one's pretty good. I can't find my stack. But my favorite would be Axe and the Sledge. I have brands that like some brands just everything they do is on point. Like Primeval Labs, have Primeval Labs? What?
Yep.
Vegan,
I stock it.
Yeah, Regan Grimes. Everything they seem to make their aminos are like on another level. Like their EAA Max is one of my favorites, and I have that in the off season. I think it's got 6 or 8 grams of carbs in it. And then when I'm prepping, towards the end, I tend to switch to Axe and Sledge, which has no carbs, which is also a blend. And same thing, their flavors, like the unicorn blood to me in prep tastes like I'm drinking Whiz Fizz water. I love that shit. Like I'm addicted to that stuff, you know.
One more. You got one more. Give us a wild card. What's something that people wouldn't expect, I guess?
Do you use pre-workouts at all? Do you run a?
No, I do. Patrick's not a major fan of pre-workouts, so I don't talk about him. But but I do. Yeah, I liked Arms Race. What's their pre-workout?
I was like Daily Pump. Their non-sim, I think it is, and
honestly, same thing with Arms Race. Everything Arms Race. So their foundation WPC is like cookies and cream and their apple, I think it's like apple pie or something. Oh man, it tastes like Macca's, like the Macca's apple pie. Everything they do is legit. They make an awesome pre-workout as well. Like I do like the face tingling. Like I like to be fucked up. Let's like, I know it's like not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm detoxing from pre's at the moment because of the stomach thing. I'm having a few weeks off, and I actually feel pretty good. But because I get supplements for free, I guess, like I've been known to smash. Even Patrick's like, he'd crack the shits if he knew the actual dosages.
Well, let's just hope he's not listening to this right now.
Yeah, he was writing the diet, 100 milligrams maximum of pre-workout caffeine. What the fuck? It's like 1.5 coffees. Like
it's like a quarter of a scoop.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. And bro, in preps, like 3 weeks out when I'm on my deathbed, I'm double scooping 400 milligram caffeines, you know? Like, I had days, man. I had days where I'd calculate it, and I'm like, I've done over 1,000 megs of caffeine today.
Holy hell, yeah! All right, so just for the ladies and gents at home, don't do that. This is someone who's got a lot of muscle mass, who's got a very high tolerance to this stuff. So don't do 1,000 megs of caffeine.
Oh, I can tell you, it puts you in a bad spot because you see other pros that don't take them at all, and they don't need it. They can just go to the gym. They don't need it, but it's like a drug. You get to the point where, like, I felt like I couldn't train if I didn't have at least 1.5 scoops of pathogen by outbreak, which is fucking brutal. I was double scooping pathogen like it was nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you just get that stress hormone just so high through prep, mate, and it's just it's incredible.
Yeah, so I can't imagine what my cortisol was, but I just felt like I had to do it. You know, so I spoke to Sergio about it. Sergio's the same as me. He abuses the pre's. So that's my goal at the moment, just to have pre's on back and leg day, and then the rest of them, the other days, not have it, and slowly transition to that. But yeah, and that Master Brain that I was taking, and the Utopia Nootropics, I'm rating them at the moment as well.
Yeah,
very good.
It's absolutely.
And infrared greens. Like I always take a green supplement, always year round. And
I'll tell you, I'll give you a recommendation as well. I know, I believe Massive Joe stocks it, so you should be able to pick this one up for free. But the White Wolf greens is really good.
Yeah,
that's the one.
In regards to green, I got a question for you. In regards to greens, you're basically going to pick your greens, I'm assuming, through the ingredients, not the taste, because I feel the best ones taste the worst, and the ones that taste the best are usually the shittest.
Yeah. So when we're looking at botanical compounds, they're the nastiest tasting ingredients and the hardest to flavor. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a pre-workout, a nootropic, whether you're talking about a fat burner, the more botanical extracts we have in there, the harder it is to flavor. So obviously when we're talking about a green supplement, we're talking about a product that's nearly entirely botanical extracts, nearly entirely plant-based.
Yeah.
flavoring becomes very hard. We try and basically when we're flavoring something, there's a couple of different things that we look at. The first is sweetener or sweetness. The second is flavor base. And the third is acidity. And we try and balance the three with different things. But at the end of the day, you can't make a turd taste nice, no matter how much sweetener or tartic acid you put on it. If you're eating a turd, it's going to taste like a turd.
Well, you know what I do now? I figure the ones that taste the worst are usually the best. So I often take them, and then I just flavor it with sugar-free cordial.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. I think that the Diet Right cordial has been the savior of many a bodybuilder over the years.
That's what I put in there, Diet Right cordial.
Yeah.
in prep, my protocol, if I'm going to the gym for my morning routine, which is step meal, which I now have one at home, but I'll wake up and I have my fat burner, which is pretty much just caffeine, gets me in the mood. Like I used to take Opti Burn by Platinum Labs and things like that. And I don't want to take multiple drinks before I'm going to go do a fucking.
Yeah, you want to dump it all into one.
Because it makes you feel sick. So another one, I was taking some, what was it? Fire Red by Axe and Sledge. They're tablets. So I like that because I just dump 2 capsules. It makes you buzzing like I want to do cardio. It puts you in the mood. And then on the way to the gym, I would just drink my Pharma Greens with little bit of Diet Right cordial in there. And then I'd get a liter of water in fluids, which is good before I do some cardio. And then, it was just Pharma Greens and Diet Right cordial. So that was my morning with a bit of glutamine in it and half a lemon squeeze. That was my morning protocol when I was doing my morning cardio and morning circuit stuff. So that seemed to work well for me.
Yeah, but you're 100% right. Usually if something tastes really bad or really botanical, if it's got that very plant-based sort of flavor, it's a good indicator that it's well dosed in botanical ingredients and that there's a lot of them in there. So you're definitely picking the right way.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for coming on the show, Aaron. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've definitely got a lot of value out of chatting to you out of this. But I know you're a busy man, so we better let you run. But thanks so much for coming on.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Aaron. Thanks, mate. Have a good one, guys.